This is a great week for us to be together because we're continuing our series called Signposts. And this series has been all about the law of God. And if you grew up around church or maybe church adjacent, you maybe have heard about this law of God that everybody's supposed to be following. And if you don't, bad stuff's going to happen to you forever after you die, like that sort of thing. But what we've said is like there's got to be a reason for this law, and here's what this law is. And what we said is the reason for this law of God, even though none of us can keep it perfectly, even though none of us is perfect, the reason it's there is to show us the holy nature of God, the sinful nature of our hearts, and thus our need of a Savior. Now, when I say the sinful nature of our hearts, I'm saying that this is ultimately a signpost pointing us to our need for Jesus. And when I say the sinful nature of our hearts, depending on how you were raised or what your background is, or maybe how you're wired, you maybe have a different reaction to that than maybe somebody else sitting next to you would. So, for instance, some of you, when I say the sinful nature of our hearts, you instantly go, yeah, that's right. Absolutely. None of us is perfect. Not a single one of us is perfect. We all have sin in our lives, and we are that way by nature. Good job. Then there's others sitting next to you who are going to go, well, hold on a second. I don't know that I'm necessarily sinful. I try to be a good person. I try to do what's right. I give to charity. I love people. You know, I give rides to people who need them. We go to church pretty regularly. I'm good to my kids. I'm a good person. Isn't that what God wants? And then there's others, when I start talking about this stuff, that they say, what law are we talking about? I've never heard of any of these laws. I thought I was just supposed to love people. What law? And if there is a law, then how can God expect me and other people to follow it? If God knows I'm imperfect, then how can God require me to be perfect? Why would God make me that way? And that's a fair question. It's a fair question, and it's one that Christians have been asking and trying to answer for years, really since the beginning. You're asking, how do I go from talking about, like there's this law that I'm supposed to follow, but I have to be perfect in order to follow it, because if I break even one of these 600 laws, commands, and statutes, then I'm guilty of breaking all of them. How can I be held responsible for that if God knows I'm already imperfect? People have been asking this for a long time. Even in around the turn of the 4th, going into the 5th century, there were these two theologians named Augustine and Pelagius that kind of traded ideas about this a little bit. And Augustine was on the side that said, well, there's this thing called original sin, and it's passed on. It's hereditary, this sinful nature. And it gets passed down from person to person in the same way your humanity, your humanness gets passed down. And Pelagius came from a different angle. He said, no, it doesn't get passed on like a hereditary trait, but it's something that all of us are infected by ultimately. We can choose. It's possible we could choose not to sin, but we just don't. So people have been trying to figure this out for years and never fully understanding what it might look like if we could really come to grips with it. But the end result is that even still today, 2,000 years later, we're having discussions about this stuff with our friends and our family. Like, haven't you ever had a question come up between you and another friend or a family member about whether or not people are inherently good or inherently bad? Maybe you've thought about it. Maybe you've sang along with a song on the radio. I believe most people are good. And at certain points in life, you agree one way or the other. Maybe you've always think one way, but most of us, we kind of go back and forth, because on the one hand, I can see all the good in the world. I can see that when a tragedy strikes, human beings step in to try to help. And I can go, look, people are good. But then I've seen some pretty rough stuff from people all over the world. And I know, as you probably know, that given the right set of circumstances, everybody is capable of anything. So we've been asking this question for thousands of years now. And even Paul, amongst the early Christians, was a leader trying to address this very thing. He was writing to some friends in Rome. Well, I shouldn't call them friends. He determined that they were going to be his friends before he ever met them. He decided, I'm going to write these guys a letter because they're dealing with some stuff, and I'm going to help them figure this out. which made sense because Paul was uniquely suited and uniquely gifted to address some of the situations they found themselves in. In the ancient world, Paul was starting all of these churches, but he was almost uniquely suited for this. He was one who was going around and starting churches amongst people who were of Jewish tradition and culture, but who lived in very non-Jewish areas, in Greek, Hellenistic areas. And he had spent a lot of time studying Jewish scriptures and Jewish theology and being steeped in that. He was Jewish himself, but he had also spent a lot of time studying non-Jewish philosophy and non-Jewish religions and had interacted with these people for a long time. So when he writes to these Roman Christians, he's talking to them about a lot of things they're experiencing within their own context. He's coming at it from the point of view of somebody who knows what they're talking about. Rome, in the ancient world, was a seat of power, a seat of authority, a seat of morality. This is one where a lot of people were focused in on moral performance as you tried to figure out whether people were good or bad or somewhere else in there. Like Rome was the place that you went to find out if you were good enough, if you were smart enough. So it was the center of both civil and religious stuff. Paul writes to them and he says this, there is no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands. There is no one who seeks God. All have turned away. They have together become worthless. There is no one who does good, not even one. So if you're more inclined to believe that humanity is inherently good, this is probably not the poster you're hanging up in your bedroom anywhere, right? That's not your motivational poster that you're hanging up. No, it's kind of a downer too, right? Like there's no one righteous. Everybody has become worthless. The worst. Nobody likes that necessarily. But what you need to understand about Paul is he's addressing a specific situation. He's trying to help people who are Jewish by culture and who have decided to follow Jesus. He's trying to help them understand why exactly they follow Jesus and what the role of the law is in their life, because they grew up with the law. He's trying to help them understand what exactly is supposed to happen with it now. And in order to do that, he's quoting the Psalms. He, in fact, quotes 6 different verses here as he's going through. In fact, one of the Psalms that he quotes says, there is no one good. And he kind of changes it a little bit. He says, to no one is righteous, which is an interesting change to make. Because righteous, at least in this context, and in the context and in the way that Paul is using it, this word righteous is actually a courtroom word. Because righteous meant you were right in the eyes of the court. So when somebody would bring forward 2 parties, say you had the plaintiff and the defendant, and the judge would hear everything out, and then the judge would say, you are righteous. This is the righteous person. That person won the case because they were on the right side of the court. And so when Paul uses it here, he's saying there's nobody who's on the right side of God. Not a single one, not a single person is on this right side of God. Why? Because none of us is perfect. In order to be on the right side of God, you have to have kept the law of God perfectly. Remember, there's 613 laws and statutes. And as good as you are and as kind as you are, as much as you give to charity, as much as you love other people, as much as you've tried to quit cussing so much as you've done this and as much as you've done that, there are times when you don't do that. There are times when you haven't done that. Like you've been a really good person, say 98% of your life. Me, it's a little bit less than that. But say you've been a really good person. You've followed all the rules and regulations and laws 98% of your life. There's still that 2%. And what that means is you are not righteous. And there's a lot of tension that comes with that. If you're basing your performance, your ability to be right with God on your performance, your ability to be perfect, then there's a lot of stress and a lot of anxiousness that can come with that. I've never been a gymnast, but I enjoy watching gymnastics. I think it's incredible what these athletes are able to do. I still remember watching the 1996 Summer Olympics back when they were in Atlanta. I watched them in my grandmother's living room. We were all glued to the television one day when the women's gymnastics team was up, and Dominique Moceanu had done her thing, and then there's Carrie Strug. And those of you of a certain age know exactly what moment I'm talking about. Oh, Carrie Strug, right? She's doing the vault, and she had hurt her leg. And she comes up to do this vault, and everybody knows she has to get a great vault on this in order for the U.S. women's team to get gold. And in this moment of incredible courage and bravery and strength, I mean, just this ultimate athlete move, she takes a deep breath, runs on what was probably a broken ankle, and does this vault and sticks the landing, does this number, and like she's obviously in pain, leg instantly lifts up. Everybody went nuts. I think I heard people 3 houses over screaming in their house when that happened. It was this incredible moment. It was an incredibly proud moment as an American, watching that. But that wasn't the most fascinating part of the Olympics for me. For me, it's always the balance beam. Have you ever seen a balance beam that gymnasts use when they're getting up there? And you know what part I'm talking about. It's a beam, it's about 4 inches wide, and it's about this high off the ground, and they're doing backflips on this thing. They're doing backflips and front flips and cartwheels and some kind of dancing maneuver in the middle of all of it. I would fall over just in this if you did this part, right? But they're doing all sorts of crazy stuff. I used to know gymnasts, and I lived with a family once who had these 3 daughters who were gymnasts, and I would go to some of their gymnastics meets. And the whole time, I'm a nervous wreck. The balance beam is happening. Like, I would leave that thing and my traps hurt because I'm just doing this number. Because I'm so afraid they're going to fall and hurt themselves. But there they are, dancing around, doing flips, doing cartwheels, jumping off this thing with multiple flips, sticking the landing. And you know what's true about the balance beam? Rarely does anybody get a perfect score on that thing. But what if? What if tomorrow, the governing body who decides who gets to go to the Olympics said, you can't come to the Olympics unless you get a perfect score on the balance beam? Can you imagine the pressure? Can you imagine the pressure and the anxiousness that would come for any gymnast who's been doing this their entire life, every day, for 6 to 8 hours a day? Can you imagine how that would make them to feel when they walked up to try to qualify for the Olympics? It's a lot like the way a lot of us do religion. We approach it as if we have to be absolutely perfect, knowing that it's very rare. In fact, it's impossible for anybody to be perfect. I can't even be perfect for a day, let alone my entire life. When we try to base our righteousness or our ability to be right with God on our performance, our moral or spiritual performance, we're going to fall short every time. But that's okay because it's not the end of the story. Now you might be asking, well, how did we get here? How did we get to this place? Why did God create us like this? Well, Paul answers this. He says it like this. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man and death through sin, and in this way death came to all people because all sinned. Now, Paul, remember, is coming from a Jewish background, and he's referring to Adam and Eve here. Just this part where it says sin entered the world through one man. He's talking about Adam, but let's include Eve there. I'm for full equality of sinfulness, ladies. You can do this, right? Just as sin entered the world through one man and woman, and death through sin. So Adam and Eve sinned. Just if you've never heard the story, here's a quick recap. Adam and Eve, first humans in the Garden of Eden. Everything's perfect. All right, next, and God says, look, I got one rule. One rule. Don't eat from that tree over there, for on the day that you eat from it, you will surely die. Don't do it. Don't do it. And what do? They do it. They eat from this tree that they're not supposed to eat of. They go and they eat from this tree, the knowledge of good and evil. Don't do it. And then everything changes. That's when sin enters human history. This was something totally alien to God's creation. sin enters, and now death enters too. And not just physical death, but spiritual death. Because what happened was these first humans, Adam and Eve, and really all of us, Adam and Eve said, you know what, God, we thank you for everything you've done so far, all the stuff you put together. Thank you. We love all of your contributions up to this point, but we'll take it from here. We've got it from here. We're going to be the arbiters of what's good and evil now. We're going to decide what's right and what's wrong. And the reality of this story of Adam and Eve that Paul's referring to is not just that it happened, but that it happens. You and I do this all the time, don't we? We look around and you say, you know, God, I know that you said this in your word. I know that my mom and dad and my grandparents taught me this, but I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to do this sort of thing over here instead. See, the moment that Adam and Eve decided to be disobedient, sin entered, and so did the gap between us and God. This distance, this separation of us from God. Because when you're not on the right side of God, you can't be close to God. And so what happened with this sin is that it ultimately began to infect everybody that came after him. You, me, and everybody between us and Adam and Eve infected with this sin. And it doesn't just infect our lives, it infects our hearts, it affects our relationships, it infects institutions and systems that we're involved in. So we can never truly get away from this sin, and we'll never be perfect. You know, in 2020, we learned more about viruses and contagiousness and all of that than we ever wanted to know. I remember people who hadn't picked up a textbook in 50 years suddenly became scientific experts on all things contagion. Do you remember what that was like going to the grocery store and bringing it home and wiping everything down immediately? Do you remember what it was like going to the bank and you had to stand here 6 feet away from the person in front of you, but somehow there was somebody able to stand right there? Do you remember what it was like? I remember walking with my kids in a 2-seat stroller, and they were little at the time, and we're walking down the sidewalk here in College Park, and people would be walking towards us, and they'd get about a block away, and they'd cross to the other side. We had the right of way because I had little kids. It was awesome, right? And they would go to the other side, and I'd give them a little wave to say thank you. But it always struck me, like we were so afraid of passing something on to each other, of infecting each other with something, that we were willing to be kind and go over there and do this instead, and just cross to the other side so nobody even had to worry about it. Because it was so easy to catch COVID. It's like that with sin, right? It's so easy to infect every part of our life. And it's what ultimately is keeping us sick. And it's because of this infection that we'll never be able to keep God's law perfectly. Because our sinful nature, ultimately, we keep choosing independence over intimacy with God. So the next logical question is, what's the point? What's the point of this whole thing? Why would God give us this law? If God knows that we're not perfect and that we're never going to keep this thing perfectly, why would God give us this law? Like, why on earth would that even come into his mind? Well, Paul tries to talk about that in the very same letter. He says, through the law, we become conscious of our sin. We suddenly begin to know about our sin. It's because of the law I'm able to understand that something's wrong. It's like when you go to the doctor. I don't know if you've ever broken a bone or anything like that, but or you had to you thought you broke a bone and you had to get an X-ray, MRI, something like that. Right? You stick your leg in there for the X-ray, and they're doing all the stuff. They come back and they go, "There it is. Sure it is. It's broke right there. We're gonna have to put that thing in a cast. We're gonna have to walk in a boot for a little bit. We're gonna do this. Here, I'll give you some pain meds for that, whatever." The X-ray doesn't heal you. The X-ray doesn't make you better. It points out what's wrong with you. The law is like an X-ray. It's just pointing out what's wrong there. Jesus is the medicine. Jesus is the remedy, the cure, not the law. So the law is there to reveal to us the sinful nature of our hearts. The law is there to reveal to us what is wrong so that we can be ready for the medicine, which is the grace of God found only in King Jesus. The law shows us the fracture in our souls. Now, for the first century Jews, the law was everything. It was everything, man. It was morality, it was civil law, it was belonging, it was culture, it was language, it was everything. And there were some very conservative parts of first century Judaism that also believed that if every Jew kept the law perfectly for just one day, then the Messiah would arrive. That they would have the Messiah arrive and show up, and then God would restore Israel to its rightful place on the world scene, and everything would be hunky-dory and great again. And that's why people like the Pharisees worked so hard towards making everybody follow the law. Well, unbeknownst to a lot of them, the Messiah did show up anyways. That Messiah's name was Jesus of Nazareth. And he comes around, he starts preaching, he starts teaching, and he's talking about something a little bit different than the way they were talking about. He's talking about the heart of the law and what the law is really for and what it should be showing them about themselves and others. He's healing people on the Sabbath, and it's driving them nuts. And they even accused him of not keeping the law. They said, you're just coming here to get rid of the law. You don't care about the law of Moses or your ancestors or anybody else. And Jesus said, no. That's not true. That's not true at all. In fact, don't think I've come to abolish the law. I haven't. I've only come to fulfill it. I've only come to fulfill that law. Now, that can be a little bit confusing if you're not steeped in the words he's using, but think about it. If I abolish something, that means it's no more. It's gone. No more is it being used. No more is it being talked about. But Jesus says he's come to fulfill the law, meaning he's going to embody the whole thing. He's going to follow the law perfectly for us. So that when you make Jesus the king of your life and you follow Jesus with everything that you have, like, you are honoring the law better than you ever have. Because Jesus is the fulfillment of the law. He's not trying to be done with it. He's saying, you couldn't keep this law, so I did it for you. So at the end of the day, what we come to learn, what we come to find out, what we come to see is that following Jesus isn't about trying harder. It's not about trying harder to be perfect. It's not about trying harder to make everybody happy with you all the time. It's not about trying harder to avoid sin so that God doesn't punish you and hit you over the head with some kind of divine hammer or anything like that. It's really about trusting what Jesus has done for you. It's really about trusting that Jesus has already done the following of the law perfectly for you. And that if you will just trust him and follow him with everything you've got, he's going to work it out. He's going to work it out. Now, this isn't licensed to any of us to go, okay, so that means I just pray this sinner's prayer and now I just do whatever I want and then God will make it okay in the end. No. If you're following Jesus, really following Jesus, you're going to do everything you can to please him every day and every moment of your life. And when you fall short of that standard, you're going to say, I'm sorry. You're going to say, I'm sorry, hey, I messed up. And you can trust in that moment that you're forgiven. So if you don't hear anything else I say today, I want you to hear this. Trust comes before try. When it comes to this following Jesus thing, just remember those words. Trust comes before try. Yes, you need to try to please Jesus, but in order to do that, in order to have the impetus and the motivation moving towards that direction, you need to trust Jesus first. Trust that he loves you. Trust that he believes that you are worth dying for and worth raising from the dead for, because he did it. Now, anytime somebody gets up in front of you and starts talking about Bible stuff, you should always ask them, okay, what do you want me to do with this now? What do I walk out of here thinking about, and how do I apply this to my life? So this morning, I want to leave you with 3 things I think you can do, you can walk out of here with. The first is this: stop pretending. Stop pretending that you are perfect or ever will be perfect. Don't lie to yourself and think you're ever going to earn your way to God. You won't, you can't, it'll never happen. And stop pretending that you can heal yourself or that you don't have anything wrong with you, because you can't heal what you can't look at. If you hide injuries from the doctor, they can't help you. The second thing is to start trusting. Trust Jesus. He's good. He will make demands on your life, and that's okay. He's good. He wants what's best for you. This world is set up in such a way that the best way of doing things is doing them God's way. So if you'll follow Jesus, your life, I think, will ultimately be better, just in a rational way. Following Jesus is the best way to live and will make you better at life. It doesn't mean that suddenly you have some kind of magical spell book that makes you better at life than everybody. It means you're following the process of this world in the best possible way. Start trusting him. Don't lean on your own understanding. Don't lean on your own goodness. Follow Jesus. Finally, share the freedom. This is good news, people. Like, if all it was following rules and laws and being perfect, we would all be in a big heap of trouble. Every single one of us. And we'd all be feeling pressure and anxiety and tension. And if we weren't, we'd still be afraid we're all going to go to hell. But I got good news for you. Jesus says, I want you to trust me. And that's all it takes, is trust in Jesus and following him with everything that you've got. That's good news. And I don't know about you, but to me, good news is worth sharing. Good news is worth passing on to somebody else. Man, there is freedom in following Jesus. When I was younger, I felt this immense pressure to be perfect. Now, no, man, I know I'm not, but Jesus is. And it's okay. I feel great freedom in that. I want that for you. And I want you to share it with other people too. So as we kind of wind down this morning, as you go out this week, if you're tempted this week at all to wonder if you're ever going to be good enough, hear these words from me. You're not. You're never going to be good enough. That goes against all the affirmations you've ever heard in your life, probably, right? But that's the good news. You don't have to be good enough, because Jesus already said you're worthy. Jesus already said you're worth dying for. You're worth going to the cross for. Jesus already said he loves you and he wants you. Yeah, we'll never be good enough, but we're already worthy. Would you let me pray for you for a second? God, thank you that you never asked us to be perfect, only to be honest and to follow Jesus. Thank you for Jesus, the one who followed the law that we couldn't keep, the one who offers the grace we don't deserve. God, help us to walk in freedom. Help us to walk in grace and with gratitude for all that you've done for us. Lord, I pray if there's anybody here now who needs to just make the decision to follow you, that they'll do that. That they won't hedge their bets, they won't pause on it, but that they'll understand it's time to follow you, that you have made a way for us, and that this is great freedom they can enjoy. Lord, help us to live in that freedom and to be the people called by your name, to be the people who know they are loved by you, who are treasured by you. Help us to live in the blessing that comes in that kind of life. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.